This is Chuck Rowe from Midwest Studies Group. Thanks for joining us again for another edition of our video series. It's that time of the year which many of you are preparing for your annual golf outing. And whether you're trying one for the first time ever or you're just wanting to spice things up after year, this video is perfect for you. So Midwest Studies Group works with a lot of great clients. And how could we not take advantage of the knowledge of Chad Pitts, Executive Director for the Iowa Golf Association? Thanks for joining us, Chad.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Now, out of curiosity, when you consider the number of outings the Iowa Golf Association puts on, the number of outside tournaments you help with, the number of outings that you maybe personally play in, how many golf outings do you personally attend each year, do you think?
Ooh, that's a good question. I bet it's probably 40 or 50, I suppose. I figured it out one time because a lot of our events are multi-day events. And one time I figured it out with, just counting the days that we do during a summer. And it was something like 100 days of golf competitions that we're involved in.
That is a crazy number of outings for, I mean, the average person maybe plays in like 3 outings a year or something, right?
Yeah. And to be maybe a little more clear of that, if we're counting those 100 days, I bet 90 of them are running the tournament and the other 10 might be me playing in it. But it's very high percentage of it is the administration, not the participation.
Well, obviously, you've seen everything from top ranking tournaments in the country to the fun tournaments put on by nonprofits. You've seen a huge range. Let's start out with a simple definition for those who are jumping into things new this year. The terms best ball and best shot sometimes get tossed around interchangeably, but they're actually very different things. Could you explain the difference? And then what do you tend to see more often at nonprofit outings?
Yeah, you're exactly right. The term best ball is in the rules of golf, and that's a term that deals with, if you and I are a team, or if we have a team of 3 people or even 4 people, we play our own golf ball throughout the hole, and we take whoever made the best score, right? And then the term best shot or scramble is, I think, what a lot of people think of when maybe they hear best ball. But best shot scramble is, our whole team tees off, we take the best shot, lay a ball down from there, we all hit, then we take the best shot from that spot and go on. And so that format, the best shot or the scramble format, is I think what you see a little bit more in the charity golf outings, because let's face it, you can have pretty much any quality of golfer have a really good time in that format, and it doesn't, pace of play isn't too big of a deal and those sorts of things. It's a fun way to play golf because you shoot pretty low scores.
Yeah. So any quality of a golfer, you haven't golfed with me yet, but but anyways, buying mulligans has been a fundraising staple at nonprofit outings to make the game a little bit more fun while bringing in a few more dollars. What are some other fun games that you've seen, when it comes to rule changes and things like that?
Yeah, sometimes people will do, an extra fee or something to get into like the proximity marker games or like longest drive, so it's maybe you have one hole where you give a prize for whoever hits the longest drive in the fairway, and there's a little sign that kind of moves along in the fairway as you play that day, as people come through and hit longer drives, and you use like closest to the hole on a par 3, or maybe longest putt on 1 or 2 holes type of deal. And sometimes you can kind of do an opt-in to pay a $20 fee or something like that to get into those games, and then that's just extra money for the nonprofit. Or you could have, I've seen some where you do skins. You could do a skins game where it's an opt-in type thing, but the winner of the skins gets half the money, and the other half can go towards the nonprofit. So those are just a couple of, in addition to the mulligan idea, which is a tried and true staple, that you can get a little bit extra from people there. And then, of course, if you're able to round up, cool memorabilia or equipment or items such as that, you can do silent auctions or just auctions of that sort of stuff kind of during the receptions afterwards when you're handing out prizes, and can get a little bit more money that way too.
Well, and a lot of people, you brought up skins, and skins is a great way to make a couple of extra bucks at an outing. Um, a lot of people get confused by the rules of skins, but it's pretty fair to say that just find a golf pro that's heading up the outing at the golf course for you, and just let people know if you want to be part of skins, just see the golf pro, and everything will be taken care of. It's not like someone actually needs to know the individual that's running the nonprofit needs to know how skins run.
Right. Yeah. Whoever's hosting your outing is going to have plenty of experience with skins. It's a very common thing that you do in your men's leagues or even Saturday, Sunday type, outings at the or regular play at the courses. The gist of it is, if there's one hole where you make a better score than every other team, then you win a skin for that hole. And so let's say somebody gets lucky and holes out a shot from the fairway for a 2 on a par 4. That probably means you got a really good chance at a skin. And there's, usually in like a scramble, especially, you don't have a whole lot of skins out there, which means if a lot of people are participating in them, it can be a good amount of money for that single skin.
Sure, sure. Well, when you think of let's go back to the games for a moment when it comes to the things that you pay for to get an advantage, like again, mulligans, or I've seen things like they call grenades. I don't know if you see this, where you take the ball and you just kind of like chuck it for an extra $5 you get to chuck it, or you mentioned like hit it a little closer, like I don't know if you ever seen like you get a piece of string and you sell.
Yep.
Yeah,
Seen the string. Yep, I've seen the string. The grenade is kind of new to me. I've never heard that term certainly for that. I think that's cool.
Well, MSG, we did some work with you guys at the IGA, and
Yep.
you and I have kind of talked about this, joked about this before, where the entire country knows that you are one of the most knowledgeable people when it comes to golf rules. And on top of that, you also know that there are a lot of competitive golfers out there. How important is it for a nonprofit to consider how many of these special items to sell to each player because of maybe rules or the competitiveness of people?
Yeah, I mean, if you're, what a nonprofit probably, the only thing they really have to totally be concerned about is the prizes they would give away for winning these events. Okay, so what you don't want to do is you don't want to pay cash right now. Now, the USGA and the R&A are looking at that rule it's called the rule of amateur status, and that could get changed in the future. But right now, you basically don't want to pay a prize of cash money to a player. So keep your prizes as in the realm of gift certificates and things like that you can redeem at the golf shop, or physical items. And there's a limit as well to the prize that any single person can take. So as an individual, you can't win a prize with a value of more than $750 for any one single event. So that's a high enough limit that I don't think you see that all that often in a nonprofit outing. I mean, typically if you're on a winning team, maybe each guy's getting a couple $100 in, gift certificate money or something like that. You usually don't see anything close to 750, but I suppose it's possible. So you got to be concerned about that. Those are the biggest things. But when it comes to, selling mulligans and selling, skins games and stuff like that, ultimately that's the player donating to your nonprofit. So there really isn't a limit to worry about there. The more, unless you want to put a limit on how many mulligans a team is going to be able to use for pace of play reasons.
Well, I didn't know if it was from a competitive standpoint, if anyone would be bothered by someone winning but they bought like 7,000 mulligans,
Yeah,
right?
that's a good point. Maybe there could be, but
You've never really noticed that.
You mentioned that. No, I haven't. You mentioned the rules of golf side. I mean, like I said, typically these things are played as scrambles, and scramble isn't really a recognized form of the game under the rules of golf. In other words, if somebody calls us and asks for a ruling in a scramble, we really can't make one because there's no language in the rule book that deals with scramble as a format of play. And so we kind of tell them, look, it's kind of up to you to rule however you want on this scramble stuff, because it's according to the governing bodies, it's not a true form of the game. Now that doesn't mean I mean, I love playing scrambles and it's a blast, to play in them. So I could give you my personal opinion on some rulings maybe, but I don't know if that's worth anything or not.
Well, that's unbelievable. I had no idea that there wasn't an official rule on that. So,
Yep.
but let's go to these pin event games and prizes and things that you brought up earlier. When you think of, you know, having the furthest putt or the longest drive or whatever, there's a billion of these pin event games that you can have. When you think of the competitive standpoint from a golfer's mind, what do you think is like the game or two that golfers really get into the most when it comes to those pin events?
Probably, I think, I think longest drive, there's still something to being the guy or the gal who hits it the furthest that I think gets people kind of going. You step up to that tee box where they know it's the longest drive hole, and they might really try to unleash one. So, of any of them, that's probably the one. And then, closest to a hole on par threes, you'll see someone who you walk up to that green and you see that little flag that's maybe only a foot from the hole. You're like, oh wow, who hit it? Who hit it that close? And you read the name, like, oh, Chuck Rowe did.
Yeah. Maybe miniature golf par three, but sure.
So yeah, I think longest drive is probably the one that people get the most excited about, though. Yeah.
So Chad Pitt's official longest drive has been how long?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. There's a hole back in the course that I grew up on. That's this 400-yard par four, but it's all kind of downhill, and it's a little 9-hole course in Southwest Iowa, and so their irrigation wasn't always the best. So I think there was one time when the fairway was really, we hadn't, kind of like right now, we hadn't had rain in forever. The fairway's pretty dry and hard, and I know I got down there close to the green, but believe it's not as impressive as it sounds when you consider about how I just like hitting it down a parking lot. So,
all downhill.
All rolls quite a ways. So yeah, I don't know. It's probably something like that. But I'm not a super long hitter. I mean, there's, especially now, but some of the guys that we have, especially some of the college kids that play in our events, they hit it so far these days. It's silly.
Well, the average nonprofit, when it comes to getting a tournament done in 4 hours or less, that's considered good time.
It's really good. Yeah.
Now, for those that are going a little longer, maybe they're taking like 5-6 hours even, what suggestions do you have to quicken up the pace a bit?
So there's a couple things. The first one is just kind of look at how many people you're putting on a golf course. Okay. If you're playing in groups of 4, let's say they're 4-person scrambles or whatever, and you have 36 groups out there, well, that's 2 groups on every hole and a shotgun start, and there's nowhere really for people to go. You know what I mean? You're just behind someone no matter what, and that's going to affect pace of play more than anything else you do. So if you've got a field of where you're starting to have to put 2 groups on every hole, or maybe even having some holes where you put 3 groups on it, just know that you're either going to have a really long round for those people, or if you could look at breaking that field up in half and doing half in the morning, or maybe, a third of them in the morning and the other 2/3 in the afternoon, that can make the experience much, much better for the people who play. The other one that I've seen just from an actual rule standpoint that I think is a really good idea is I've played in some where, it's scramble format and they just do an automatic 2-putt rule. So you basically have all 4 of your golfers, if it's a 4-person again, everybody hits that first putt, and then you don't worry about tapping in technically on the second putt. It's a scramble, so odds of 3-putting are almost nothing, or almost nil anyway. So they just don't waste your time even tapping that second putt in. Just, it's an automatic 2-putt. That's the worst anybody can do once they get on the green. So I think that helps, if that help, if you think about that over a course of 18 holes, if that helps, 30 seconds a hole by not having somebody do that, well, you're saving 9 minutes right there on the round. So
Yeah, yeah. Gosh, imagine if in the PGA or the top amateur tournaments, if they just had two putt rules, right?
that's right.
And
Yeah,
give me
if you never had to tap, you're never tapping in, and you're certainly not grinding over some 4 or 5 footer, when the first two guys missed that 4 or 5 footer, and now the third guy's putting, and now all of a sudden you've made them take, 2.5 more minutes on that hole, by having them hit that second putt. So.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what about flights? I'm assuming that once you get to the point of seventh flight, fifth place, or something ridiculous like that, it just starts getting a little crazy. In your
Mhm.
opinion, what would be like a perfect range for the number of flights and number of placings to make things competitive yet fun for a charity outing?
Yeah, no, it's a good question too, and it goes back to, it all kind of depends on how many total people you have playing anyway. But I always thought like somewhere in the 10 to 15 range made sense. And if you have, maybe if you have 10 teams in a flight, maybe you're paying the top 3 or 4. If you have 15 teams in a flight, maybe you're paying the top 5 or 6, something like that. So you kind of pay about, a third of your teams out in prizes. And at those levels, I think your scoring matches up pretty well too, because you want the teams that kind of know they have no chance to finish as the lowest team in of the whole day, to go, well, I still want to play, and yeah, I don't necessarily worry about winning a prize every single year, but if every few years I kind of flight myself, and hit the prize money in the second flight or something, I think that's the way that you keep everyone coming back. In addition to, hopefully, that's everybody recognizes the good cause that the tournament ultimately is supporting. But I like in the 10 to 15 range, and then paying, like I said, if it's 10, maybe the top 3. If it's 15, maybe the top 5 or 6.
Okay. And well, when it comes to flights and the pin event prizes and all that stuff that you save for the end, another point of contention with nonprofits, they kind of go back and forth on this. Is on one hand, you could do like this fancy awards dinner, everyone sticks around, has a nice steak dinner or whatever, or you could just have a quick awards program, maybe give out a drink or two, and everyone just kind of learns who wins and gets going. On average, what do you find that golfers prefer to see?
I think at the nonprofit, charity outings, I think they want to have. I don't know that you need a sit down dinner, but I think you should have some food for them, and have them something for them to kind of do and hang out and sort of socialize after the round, and keep them there for just a little bit, because you do want to announce the prizes, and I think they like that typically. I mean, usually if I go play in a charity outing, I, that's what I'm doing that day, and I'm gonna want to stick around. It's not like, you know, hey, I'm playing 3 other things. I need to get the heck out of there because I got other stuff to do. I don't, and I think that's true of most people who play in these things. They kind of know that's what they're doing that day. So if they're sticking around another 30 minutes for something like that, I don't think that's too big of a problem. And most of the time, because their shotgun starts, everybody's kind of finishing right at the same time too. You're not asking them to, stick around for 2 or 3 hours or anything like that. So the other benefit to that is, I think, if people have had a good time out on the golf course, and you have things like your silent auction set up, you might be able to garner a few more dollars based on, people maybe bidding in a way that they wouldn't bid, before the round. If you, I think
Mhm.
you understand what I'm probably hinting at, or they had a couple drinks, and that there's nothing wrong with sort of uh, going about it that way, I don't think.
So I think the advice Chad was giving out, everybody, is make sure you give out a lot of drink tickets during the day, and it'll help you down the road.
I think,
Um,
in another, an idea that I don't know that I've necessarily seen it, but I think would work well, is if you did have people, going around on beverage carts or whatever, but as part of, maybe when you sell that 6-pack to a group, you give them the option to donate a little bit extra as part of that sale,
oh,
to the
nice.
I think it's almost like maybe instead of tipping or in addition maybe to tipping the beverage cart girl or guy, you give them the option to throw an extra $10 at the charity or $20 at the charity. I think you'd get a lot of people who'd go ahead and do that.
That's a great idea. Great idea. So, but to just summarize this real quick, you're suggesting that maybe a little quick, maybe like a burger or a dog and a couple of drinks to quickly eat amongst everybody as they're standing around talking with each other is a good route to go, opposed to having like a 2-hour steak dinner afterwards.
100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Or just, yep. I think that's a great way, or just like heavy appetizer type stuff, your chicken wings, and
Okay.
people stand around and talk and eat it at the same time. I think that's what I would do.
Well, it's not every day that people get to listen to a golf association executive director from anywhere in the United States about a golf outing. So we're going to get as much bang for our buck as we can by finishing off this question here. And that is, are there any other bits of advice that you give the nonprofits from a player's perspective with golf outings?
I think just make it fun, and I'll tell you that, going back to the pace of play question you had earlier, that probably the one thing that'll drive your players or participants, make the experiences making the experience negative for them is that pace of play. And so the more people you put out on the golf course, that's the biggest concern I would have, or biggest advice I would have, is to, if you do start to get to that level where you're going to have to put a couple groups on every hole, I would seriously try to break that up if I could into like I said, a morning and an afternoon. And you can do stuff with prizes for the morning group and the afternoon group, so you don't certainly have them sticking around all day. That's still fun, but that can be pretty long days if you start asking them to spend, those outings can be 6 or 7 hours that I've seen before on some of these things. So you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. I'd say that's probably the biggest advice I would have. But most of the time people understand why they're there that day, and for 99% of them, winning the tournament isn't the reason that they're there, right? So let them have a good time, have some stuff that entices them to donate a little bit more to your charity, silent auctions, the mulligans, all that sort of stuff. I think that just makes it a lot more fun.
Yeah, and you bring up a great point. That pace is such a huge deal. That's usually the one complaint you hear from anyone that's going a little long for a tournament. And one thing I've seen before too, which I would use myself, is on your scorecard. Let's say you do have 36 teams participating, and you really do need to get through this. On the back of your scorecard, you can actually write a schedule and write out, okay, by the 9th hole you should be like here at this time, and by the 15th hole you should, at this time you should be at the 15th hole, just to help remind people, hey, keep pushing. Pushing. So
yep. And if you going back to what we talked about, and maybe that's what you have to do. You have to have 36 groups out there, so you have a couple on every hole. That's fine. Maybe think about that automatic 2-putt rule, because that you'll be surprised at how much that can just kind of keep things moving.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Or else a team like with someone like me on it could be there for 8-putt tries in a row. So anyways, hey, thanks for joining us, Chad. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime, Chuck. Thanks again for having me. It was fun.
And to everyone else, thanks for watching. Chuck Rowe, Midwest Studies Group. Catch you next time. And there you go. Piece of cake.
All right, awesome. So, thanks, man.
No, appreciate it. This is very helpful. So anyways, okay, right. I'll talk to you later.
All right, sounds good. See you.